currently. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to first say a big thank you to Stacy McBride. She has done a phenomenal job working and giving me rainy day numbers and really depressing me a few days and then coming back in with better forecasts. So excited to give you this budget tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board, for having me. The revenue projections in Amherst County, a few things to note. We've had minimal growth in real estate tax revenues. Primarily, that's because Amherst, unlike some other localities, we reassess every 6 years. 2020 was the last one. You can understand, as we've had this real estate boom, we've you could argue, missed the bubble for inflated real estate values, such as Lynchburg, our neighbor, having a higher or reassessing more frequently. Another thing to note that you'll find in a later chart that I'll bring up is veterans receive 100% homestead exemption now. That means there's no real estate tax paid on primary homes. I won't be able to give you an exact figure on that, but that has made a slight impact on projections. There has been a leveling off of development-related permits. I would say for the past 5 or 6 years in community development, we've seen an increase steadily every year on zoning permits, single-family dwelling permits, and building permits. That's leveled off, probably as expected. There's an increased federal and state assistance for DSS, and there's also incremental growth for most other revenues, and you'll see that later in some of the charts that I'm going to present to you.
Hey, Mr. Bryant, can I stop you real quick?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I just want to, the veterans receive 100% homestead exemption now. Is that for, regardless of net worth, regardless?
Is there status exemption?
Yes.
Okay,
Had to go deeper.
I'm just wondering, and if so, well, it's not really advertised, but I mean, you know, I didn't know that.
Sure, yeah.
I need to look.
Thank you, Ms. Irby. Yes.
I can't hear.
Oh, you gotta be,
100% service-connected disabled.
you gotta be disabled. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was getting ready to say that's almost sounds.
Okay, Mr. Pugh, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Some other assumptions, personal property tax revenue growth of 3%. So those are assumptions that are based in the budget, assumptions and numbers that Amherst has historically used. Used vehicle values are still somewhat inflated. So when we're looking at used vehicle values, they're still somewhat inflated. Due to inflated values, an 80% ratio for the values is what we've used in the past, and it's also what we've proposed in this budget. So we're keeping it the same as part of this proposed budget. It's anticipated that values will reach a new normal in 2024. So that's the information that we've received from our Commissioner of Revenue, Ms. Irby. Ms. Irby, jump up and tell me if I'm wrong. And then rates should be evaluated in the next budget cycle. So in the next budget cycle, a year from now, we should take a look at those rates and make sure that those personal property values and try to understand what they've done. But we believe they're still a bit inflated. We do anticipate they'll level off next year. Okay, looking at revenues, our revenues have increased to $56,157,638. I'll come back to this chart again, but in rough numbers, real and property taxes make up obviously the lion's share of our revenues at $31 million. Other tax revenues, 9.6. Permits, fees, and charges for service, 1.9. State revenues, 7.4. Federal, 2.2. Other revenues, 1.4. And use of fund balance, 1.9. This pie chart will give you just kind of a general glimpse of what it looks like. So our revenues, our largest is 29% of real estate, 27% personal property, and then the next largest is state revenues at 13%. Okay. And so this chart compares the FY 2022, which is in green, to projected FY 23 and proposed 24. You'll generally see, my takeaway from this is generally with property taxes, personal property sales tax, we've gone up incrementally. We've gone down some in real estate taxes, and there's two things to consider. One, it's back to what I said earlier. We only reassessed, our last reassessment was 2020, so they really haven't gone up. And then, as I understand it, that Homesteading Act that I mentioned to you for veterans has caused a slight drop in that real estate, in the taxable real estate. So that's why you see a bit decline there. Personal property tax rebate. As I mentioned earlier, in FY 2023, we did a 20% tax reduction. And so just so you know, a 1%, just 1% reduction is $118,000 of tax revenue. So when we did a 20%, it was a 2.3 return to the citizens. And that's only for vehicles and motorcycles. So when we look forward and we look at this 2024 budget, factoring in a 3% growth rate, as I mentioned earlier, 20% reduction in value. So we're asking you to give that same reduction back to the citizens, and holding that. It's changed a bit this year. So now 1% of additional tax rebate is $137,000. Okay, so that's gone up, and that totals $2.7 million would be returned to the citizens. Again, that's only for vehicles and motorcycles. Any questions on this slide? Because I know this probably is an important slide to you. Okay. All right, some budget challenges for this FY 2024 is our intent to include a market study adjustment for staff. You may recall at your budget or at your workshop in September, this was presented to you. This is the same market study. We're not asking you to fund a new market study. We're asking you to take the market study that was complete and change it. When we did comparisons of other localities, this compares 4 regional studies that were completed, approximately 15 counties, generally of similar size to Amherst. We weren't comparing Fairfax County or counties that were irrelevant to us. This does change. We work a 37.5-hour work week. It changes it from a 37.5 to a 40. In our studies, we learned that most localities do a 40-hour work week. And so our market study adjustment is based on that. So it would again go from a 37.5. We get an hour lunch. We could reduce that to a 30-minute lunch. Would include also a 7% cost of living adjustment for staff to match state-supported positions. As you know, teachers, in Governor Youngkin's budget, teachers and support staff are looking at a 7% cost of living adjustment, as well as constitutional officers. So we're asking the same thing. So the market study, again, was looking at 2022 numbers. We're trying to get our folks, our employees, to average with the market study, and then proposing a 7% cost of living adjustment. This includes an 18% increase to school support. This was an ask that they have of us, and I'll come back to that later. This budget also does not raise any taxes. I think that's good news. And an increase in cost anticipated after 7% increase in CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So that Consumer Price Index of December 2022 evaluated all of 2022. So that CPI, cost of living, went up 7%. This slide shows the budget, the operating and maintenance budget, showing both the revenues at $56,157,000, and then our expenses at $55,992, with an excess of $165,000. So your revenues and expenses. And to show you also in a pie chart, visually I think it's helpful to see this, 29% is spent on education, 24% on public safety. Those are clearly our 2 largest of where our funds go in Amherst County, are education and public safety. And every year we show you this chart. These are our revenue and expenses, what we're projecting out to 2028. This year at 2024, you can see how close they are and how tight they are. We are presenting you a budget that doesn't raise taxes, supports staff, supports public safety, and over time, those numbers, that projection, the revenues and expenses opens up towards the revenue. And so every year we'll come back and reevaluate that. So these are significant items that are in the operating budget. We are anticipating the jail and juvenile detention increase of about 250,000, factored in a fuel inflation cost of also 250,000. Health insurance is increasing. Our numbers were significantly higher. We rebid this back out and got multiple bids back in. It came in at like 22, 23% higher than last year. We've been able to negotiate down to 17%, but it's still an increase for our employees as well as Amherst County. Implementing the market study of 924,000, a 7% COLA for our employees, and education support. That's a request that we anticipate. Now, the schools have their meeting on Thursday night. However, I met with Dr. Wells today before this meeting. This is the number that Dr. Wells is going to the school board with. There's a couple factors he said that could change this, but I think he feels fairly confident that this is a good number for us for our budgeting purposes at this point in time.
Right. So the 2.5 million additional for schools, what is that for?
Well, part of it is the support, because as you may recall, when Governor Youngkin proposes a 7% increase for school employees, that includes teachers and their support personnel, we learned that just more than 50%, when there's a COLA increase, 50% funded by the state. The locality has to make up the rest. So every percent increase is 390,000 additional that we have to make up for that 1% change. And so it's that. Ms. McBride, was there anything else that was?
Just their normal operating expenses. Fuel has been big and their electric bill has been big.
We learned that in December alone, their electric bill was $40,000 more than the previous December. And so expenses like Ms. McBride said, fuel, electricity, and things like that that are out of their control have really pushed up.
Thank you very much, sir.
So this is an interesting slide, why the market and the COLA increase. In FY 2022, the board has supported staff with a 4% COLA. It was a 5% for the comp board. That at that time was prior to our market study, so we were still trying to get our employees up. We did have a cost of living increase of 1.4%, but in 2023, again, you supported staff with a 6.5% COLA, but staff was also hit with cost of living of 7%, and we had a 6.5% health insurance increase. And then similar to 2024, 7% COLA is being proposed. CPI has gone up 7%, and we're facing a 17% health insurance increase. So this is a budget that supports our staff and tries to keep, not only bring them to market, but after we get them to market, is to keep them on track with this cost of living adjustments. So some other considerations, 2022 we had a 17% employee turnover rate here for employees in the county. Generally speaking, anything over 15% is considered high. So we're a couple percentage points above that. Virginia Employment Commission information, Amherst County unemployment is at a pre-pandemic level at 3.7%. So fairly low unemployment across the county will in turn then make it, low unemployment will make it difficult for us to recruit. Institutional knowledge of staff will be lost. Inflation is slowing, but it still exists. And we desire to stay market competitive with other localities. We've also, of course, the minimum wage increase to $12 an hour in Virginia can create some compression and some equity issues as we're recruiting.
Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
the 17% employee turnover, that's county excluding school, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
And within that 17%, does that include everything from public safety to county administration, everything?
It does not include
Okay.
part-time, it's all full-time employees.
So all full-time employees does not include part-time.
Would that include people retiring, people moving on to other jobs, people, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay,
How many is that? I mean, what is 17% of our workforce? How many people is
you
that?
have a total number, Ms. Warner?
43, we've lost 43 people,
43.
43 people in the last year.
yes, in 2022.
Could we get a breakdown on where they,
Yeah, that was gonna be
what
my next
departments?
question.
Sure, yeah.
Yes, I'll get that to you.
Thank you so much.
So some budget conclusions. This budget put together would fully fund the school's request as we know it. Of course, their meeting's Thursday night, so as we understand it, we'll fully fund what they've requested. We've also built, in our work with Mr. Beam and Public Safety, we understand that almost every year there's an ambulance that's on our CIP, and we're asking you to rank an ambulance against a park or a trail or some other capital improvement issue. And we understand we need about a medic unit a year. So Ms. McBride has done a phenomenal job of working that into our operations budget. So we hope to not have to rank those in the future. We think we're always going to need an ambulance. And so we're trying to be looking into the future in that way. So that's built into the budget. SRO match for 6 additional positions. Citizens reduced vehicle value by 80% to not overtax. Already talked about that. Recreation, some increased funding for current and new programming. And employees bringing staff to market and implementing the COLA. And then savings provides close to $200,000 for savings or unexpected needs.
Right, you're reducing it by 20%, not 80%.
Well, you reduced vehicle values to 80%.
Oh, yes, you're right, I wrote that wrong.
Yes, correct.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Thank you.
To 80%.
Thank you.
Thank you very
The
much.
the numbers don't reflect that.
Wait a minute, go back. The school resource officer match for 6 additional positions, what match? What does that mean?
State.
So last year you agreed to allow the sheriff's department to apply for a grant to cover 6 SROs. That grant is graduated to the point that in 5 years, you'll be paying for those 6 SROs. But this year, it's about 30% that we're matching.
And how much money is that?
100 and, hang on, let me look. Give me just a second.
Yeah, there was some one-time expenses last year, or they'll be reoccurring for vehicles and equipment.
Well,
and
they'll
things
roll
like
that into their budget, but you gave them $470,000 to equip all 6 of them. But the funding for their salary and benefits is on a graduated scale over,
5 years, right?
5 years, I believe, yeah. They,
Each year,
huh?
30% each year,
I thought it was graduated until we had to pay them all.
30%.
That's not the way I understood it last year, but
And are all those
I'll
po-
investigate it.
Are all
That'd be
those
better if it was.
positions filled? We have people in those positions?
It's 134,000 is what we budgeted to cover all 6.
All right, 134,000. And do we have people in all those positions?
2 right now, right?
We have 2.
Thank you.
Any more questions before I move to the next slide?
Wade, Mr. Pugh?
Good.
Mr. Bryant, I'll just wait, I'll wait.
No.
And then I said yes. Well, I'm very indecisive. What I really was getting at, though, is, I would figure sales tax is up substantially because the price of everything has risen. So when you go to the store and you buy items, I would assume the sales tax is up because you're spending more money as well.
Yes, that has grown. Do you mind me answering?
Meals tax.
No, please.
Yes, but I've seen a slight slowing in the sales tax this year, so I was conservative in my number, okay? I'm kind of waiting we should get a report from the state, probably not till June, as to what they estimate we would receive, and we didn't hit it last year, so I backed off a little bit.
All right, what about cigarette tax? Do you have that broken down in here, or?
It's in the worksheet that was attached that's detailed, but it's still running about 410, 415. It's not much change in it.
All right, and then the other thing that I was so concerned, we receive money from these gas stations where they operate these skill games, isn't that correct?
We don't get that anymore.
We do not get that anymore.
That tax went away. The reason they still have the skill games is there's a lawsuit right now, so it's on hold.
Okay, I know the Virginia Assembly has some legislation going through. so-
Correct. And we may get a tax, but right now we don't have one.
Okay,
We haven't received any this year.
thank you.
And do our projections take into account the reduction in the grocery tax?
There is no reduction to the, county, to the local,
I thought
tax.
it was statewide in the governor's budget, it would be a reduction in the grocery tax.
It is, but it's at the state level. It's not a reduction in our 1%. They took that out.
Okay. Thank you.
They
All right.
protected it.
Later on our agenda, there is a proposed ordinance change for lodging. I think to make sure we're recovering the lodging tax on short-term rentals. Was that considered in any way in this budget?
No, I don't believe
It has been, we've been seeing a large increase in lodging. I believe we are recouping a fair amount on those short-term rentals. And yes, I did increase our lodging tax estimate. You'll see an increase in the tourism budget as well because 2/3 of that has to go to tourism.
But not as a direct impact of the ordinance, though,
No.
just based on what you're seeing.
Just,
Right.
I think you're, I
Yeah.
didn't make any change for the
Right.
ordinance itself because I felt like we were already seeing it.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Bryant, thank you so much.
Welcome. So County Administrator's recommendation is to include a market study adjustment for staff based on changing to a 40-hour work week. So again, from a 37.5-hour to a 40-hour work week. Include a 7% cost of living adjustment for staff to match state-supported positions. Include an 18% increase to school support, that's $2.5 million. No increase to any taxes. Maintaining a 20% reduction to vehicle values for personal property. And adding the funding for a medic unit to the annual operating budget. And also, we're able to fund all one-time CIP, so all one-time capital improvement items that were on the list that you previously ranked, and all one-time supplemental projects. So what we'll get to in the future will be, we'll look at the cut line. We'll look at the CIP cut line. Ms. McBride has that if you want to pull that up. But we're not going to ask you to make that decision tonight on that cut line and how far this money can we have about 165,000. So we can move down the list on the capital improvement reoccurring list. So all I'm saying we funded in this budget is the one-time stuff, no reoccurring at this point, which we can talk about. So again, next steps, or next meeting and next steps are to finalize reoccurring supplemental projects. Any open questions, and then school's budget will be before you to present on March 21st, and then finalizing the budget by March the 28th. Any questions for staff?
Board members? No, sir. Mr. Wade? I have one question, comment. So you said that fiscal year '24, 1% of the personal property was $137,413.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
right? So 20% would be $2.7 million. Okay, so we are reducing personal property by $2.7 million
Yes, sir.
across the board. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Bryant? All right, next thing on that agenda is, I believe, well, if I had it.
Health insurance?
Adjournment?
No. Health insurance, results and committee recommendations. Thank you, Jim.
As directed by the board, I worked with our benefits consultants, Pierce Group Benefits, to release an RFP in early November, seeking proposals for medical, dental, and vision insurance coverage for the county for FY 2024. The proposals were evaluated by staff and Ms. Tucker, who was on the evaluation committee. And after receiving that information from Pierce Group and a lot of discussion, we want to make the following recommendation. We recommend that the county contract for the FY 2024 plan year with Piedmont Community Health Plan for employee medical insurance, Delta Dental Premier for employee dental insurance, and Anthem Vision for employee vision insurance. And I'm happy to talk about what came in on the quotes and the different percentages. Piedmont Community Health Plan was significantly less than the other responding companies. And their quote initially was 21.9%, which we have been able to negotiate down to 17% increase. As you know, with inflation, medical trend has been very high. So to be able to get them down to 17% was quite an accomplishment. We looked at the dental renewal, and although we could have saved a small amount of money by going with Anthem Dental, after we looked at the network, there were several dentists in the area that we know employees regularly use that do not accept Anthem Dental. And so we did not feel like the small amount that we were going to save, which was about between $13,000 and $14,000, was worth the disruption to the employees. So that's why we're recommending staying with Delta Dental. And then with the vision insurance, the two vision companies came in with an increase of 7.1% and 11.7%. And Anthem Blue View Vision was willing to give us a flat renewal for what we're currently paying. With VSP, we currently had a 4-year contract that is up this year, and Anthem Vision was willing to offer us at the same price an additional 4-year contract. So, and the other issue we had with Vision was that in order to save money, VSP would not issue membership cards to our employees. This was frustration to our employees and also to HR staff because the employees would get to their doctor and could not remember who they had for vision. So they would call HR so that I could tell them that, VSP didn't issue a card and they just needed to give the provider their social security number. So we did check with Anthem, and they are willing to issue cards to our employees. So we felt like the small disruption of switching to this company was worthwhile because they would get a membership card, which they had not gotten before. And we're also saving the county money by doing a flat renewal versus the other two companies, which were VSP and Superior Vision by MetLife, and they would have been an increase.
Board members, any questions for Ms. Warner?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that working with them, they started out 22% increase, got it down to 17%, and then had some added benefits, one being that card, which was big. And I just want to thank staff so much on behalf of the board for the work that they did.
And unlike the other budget items tonight, this item we do need action on, and the reason is that open enrollment is May 1st for next fiscal year. So staff needs to be directed to go ahead and contract with these companies because it's going to take us that amount of time to contract with them and then make the changes to the system that we need to make for open enrollment.
You,
I have no questions.
Wade, Mr. Ayers?
No, sir.
All right, so 2 questions. One, is this built into your budget? Okay, and 2, what really matters to me, anytime you start talking about changing insurances and that, is there a reduction in overall benefits to our employees?
No, we asked for equivalent benefits.
So we are looking for a motion for them to authorize county staff to move forward with contracting with the medical, dental, and vision providers recommended by the Health Insurance RFP Evaluation Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board authorize county staff to move forward with contracting for FY 2024 employee health insurance with PCHP for the employee medical insurance at a negotiated 17% increase over FY 2023 cost, with Delta Dental Premier at a flat renewal rate for employee dental insurance, and with Anthem Vision for employee vision insurance at no increase in cost.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right, that was the last thing on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned until 1900 hours, correct? Good job, Jeremy. Sullivan's back.
All right, we got an hour.
Go eat something. We got food for y'all.
All right.
Subway.
Oh, man, I've been on a diet. I can't be eating that stuff.
Just take your bread off. Eat your bread.